Well, it appears we have some breaking news over the summer break. That is, if you believe the Italian publication Autosprint, who have leaked or shared that Adrian Newey, the godfather of ground effect cars, the godfather of building multiple championship cars with Red Bull, who earlier announced this year that he would be leaving Red Bull at the middle of next year, summer of 2025, that is, has reportedly signed a deal with Aston Martin. And so we'll get into what that means. I will sort of add right now that this is just one publication. These are not confirmed reports. Supposedly, there's an announcement coming in sometime later in the year. It cannot be announced right now because there are some contractual restraints with the way the Red Bull exit has played out for Adrian Newey. So at the moment, we have what can only be described, in my opinion, as a strong rumor. Nonetheless, we don't have a whole lot of racing going on, so why not dive deep into it? So what I'll do here is we'll cover the news itself and sort of the why and how this deal, if it has come to fruition, what this means for Aston Martin. And then finally, there's a lot of stuff I'm reading about Ferrari missing out. And as a Ferrari fan, I'm obligated to defend that. And so I'll be doing that as well. So first, let's get into what has been reported. So according to Autosprint, Adrian Newey has signed a $100 million deal, which is a multi-year deal, reportedly at $25 million each year. So supposedly for 4 or maybe even more years, with Aston Martin. And Aston Martin have sort of emerged as this dark horse candidate in the Adrian Newey sweepstakes. For the longest time, it had been Ferrari, it had been Williams to a certain extent, and then Aston Martin. We also heard about some rumors about him joining McLaren as a consultant and maybe even Mercedes at some point. So I guess outside of the back markers, really, there's not a whole lot of teams that have been left. I was kind of waiting to see if Haas would be in the mix too, but maybe they were at some point, but just a millisecond. Nonetheless, Adrian Newey has been having a lot of talks with Ferrari over the course of the last few weeks, and especially at the beginning of his exit announcement. But then over the last couple of weeks, it has emerged that Aston Martin and Lawrence Stroll in particular has been super aggressive, has offered him this mega deal. And Adrian Newey is supposedly taking that deal that'll offer him the chance to pair up with Lawrence Stroll, work in that magnificent facility where Lawrence Stroll has been investing millions and millions of dollars. So his plan for conquering Formula One now includes Adrian Newey, supposedly. And I think it bears mentioning, and Shez and I have talked about this in the past. I at this moment still don't particularly believe the rumor, although it does seem like a pretty strong one at this point. I've always sort of thought about whatever's played out in the media as a negotiating tactic with Ferrari in particular. And I say that not as a Ferrari fan. Adrian Newey has lent his voice to that. He has indicated repeatedly in interviews that he would have loved to have the chance to work at Ferrari. It didn't come to fruition a few years ago. And so that door sort of remained open to him, at least as of right now. And we're not confirming any news just yet. And then secondly, you also talked about working with Lewis Hamilton, right? And Lewis Hamilton is going to Ferrari next year. So it stands to reason that decision of potentially joining Ferrari has been front and center of his mind. So I, for one, would be really shocked if he does end up going to Aston Martin. Although you can see why he would go there. And I don't think money is the biggest sort of criteria. Ferrari themselves have indicated that they wouldn't mind matching any salary that he would get. A team like Ferrari can afford really anything. So I don't believe for one second that the money is the issue. I think the issue is having the kind of leadership role that Adrian Newey wants and demands, and rightly so. And then I think for Aston Martin, the big sort of tilting point might have been the fact that they will be working with Honda engines here soon. So given the history that Adrian Newey has had and the success that he's had with Honda, it stands to reason that might have been one of those tipping points in those discussions. What I think this is also indicative of is where Aston Martin is at. Now, earlier this year, we've been sort of wondering if Lance Stroll will continue or not, particularly after Fernando Alonso's announcement. And It seemed like even Carlos Sainz, who up until recently was out of a job for next year, had some discussions, but became quickly evident that they were not going to move away from Lance, that is Aston. And so I think you have to start asking those questions now, because Lawrence Stroll reportedly is going to go after Max Verstappen aggressively. And I think this poses a really enticing decision for Max. Should he choose to go to Aston Martin, or should he then go to Mercedes, where Toto has been openly flirting with him for since the beginning of the season, really? So um, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens there, because Adrian will not be able to join the team until the middle of summer next year, 25. So supposedly his work won't even begin to take shape until probably 2026 at the earliest. And it'll be interesting to see then whether Fernando Alonso decides to stick around. I suspect he will want to. And then what happens to that second seat? Does Lawrence Stroll finally sit down Lance and say, it's been a great run, but I've got to get Max Verstappen in, if that in fact is an option. So I think that that's fascinating in and of itself. And so as more comes out over the course of the next few weeks, Shaz and I will break down what that means for Newey, for Aston Martin. But I do kind of want to focus my effort and attention today on what this means for Ferrari, because everything that I've read seems to say some form of Ferrari have dropped the ball. This was yet another chance for them to sign Adrian Newey after a failed attempt in the past, or several failed attempts, depending on how you want to count those attempts in the past. And there has been a lot said in the media. As recently as about a month ago, Shez and I talked about the comments that came out of Ferrari, in particular Benedetto Vigna, and he said he didn't want to, quote unquote, upset the apple cart. And in recent days, we've heard, or at least we've seen in the media, that Fred Vasseur vetoed the decision to sort of bring Adrian Newey on board, because Adrian wanted to have a part-time role with sort of full-time capabilities, in that he wanted to have veto power over personnel, over certain strategic decisions, over a variety of things that generally would fall under the team principles umbrella. So in other words, Adrian reportedly, allegedly, wanted to be sort of the pseudo team principal, and that evidently was not going to work. And I think in recent weeks, Fred has himself talked about the fact that his quote is something to the effect of, "Well, I always tell people that individuals are less important than the team as a whole." And I think you can kind of see some of that being played in the media. Ferrari sort of limiting expectations, or playing damage limitation, if that's what you want to call it. But I really do think, as a Ferrari fan that has seen, oh, now how many years of broken heart seasons, right? With incompetence, with all kinds of things that us as Ferrari fans have been kind of dealing with for a while. I actually think that this is a breath of fresh air. Look, don't get me wrong, having Adrian Newey would be the best thing that we could have. We do not have technical direction. What Ferrari has suffered with, at least over the course of the last few years, is they start out strong and then they kind of lose their way through the season. And unfortunately, that's what this season has also brought out, right? We started very well, and then Ferrari sort of lost their way halfway through the season. Now they're kind of working back, and who knows what the rest of the season will look like. So there's no doubt that bringing Adrian Newey in whatever capacity can only be helpful. However, one of the things that Ferrari has struggled with in the past is organizational culture. And what Fred has been trying to do is set up a culture that mimics a lot of what Mercedes has found success in, a lot of what Red Bull has found promise and success in. And so it's this whole idea of having a team that works together versus having individuals that have too much power. And for one, I cannot disagree with him, because if he, as in Fred Vasseur, is the leader of the team, then he's the leader of the team. Bringing in Adrian Newey is bringing in another large personality in the team, not in the sense that Adrian Newey is a difficult person to work with, but when the rubber meets the road and when you have to make these decisions on a day-to-day basis, that's where a lot of clashes happen. Look, it's no coincidence that Audi decided to scrap whatever form of leadership they had with Andreas Seidel and everything that we heard about there, and bringing Mattia in and sort of rebuilding that. So Ferrari have gone through that rebuilding phase already a couple of years ago, and I'd hate for them to go through all of that again. So while I can understand the desire to bring Adrian Newey in, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. And you can see where teams that don't have Adrian Newey have been able to catch up. I mean, just look at McLaren. Although they've got ex Red Bull personnel, so there's something to be said there. But even look at Mercedes now; they're firmly in the mix for race wins this year, and so it is possible for Ferrari to kind of get there. They do have to find and strengthen the technical department. There's no doubt about that. But the question then, I think, for Ferrari's leadership is this worth it? And it seems, at least as of right now, that they've ended on no. I think this would be a really sad thing in the end for Ferrari, but I also think for Adrian Newey because towards the end of your career, I think you kind of want to go and do some of the things that you would have some sort of romanticism with, right? And the lure of working at Ferrari and winning with Ferrari, bringing them back into dominance, I don't think can be understated. And then working with drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc is really no joke. Now he might get Max there and Aston and Alonso there, but look, there's no guarantees about how new projects work. Again, we've seen the Audi project. Audi has several resources and a lot of investments put in there. So in some ways, it's no different than what Lawrence Stroll is doing. But those are not guaranteed or at least have the kind of promise that being at Ferrari would have, given how close Ferrari are relative to Aston Martin in championship chase. So I think it's going to be fascinating. We'll look to see if this rumor or this reported news at this point is confirmed, and Shez and I will be back again soon to break down the implications of said decision. In the meantime, let us know if what you think. Is this a good move for Adrian Newey? Did Ferrari actually whiff once again? Or maybe they have finally taken the path that will have short-term pain and long-term gain. As always, thanks for your comments. Many of you have let us know how we can be better in more ways than one. We really, really appreciate it. We really, really appreciate the interaction that our community provides. We love each and every one of you, and thank you all for being a part of this journey. Please like, please subscribe. About half of you are watching us without subscribing. We'd love for you to subscribe, and that really allows us to keep doing this more and more often. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.